prototype, or Object 1006, is arguably the most intelligent and dangerous character in Poppy Playtime. Today, we're going to delve into a character known as the Prototype, or the notorious hand that appeared at the end of the second chapter of Poppy Playtime in all its glory. Even after the release of Chapter 3, little is known about it. If I miss anything related to this prototype in this breakdown, make sure to write it in the comments, thus completing this video with your thoughts on what I might have missed. The first concrete mention of the prototype is found at the end of Chapter 1 when we pick up the gray cassette. Here, it's mentioned that the missing Object 1006 never returned, but they don't even tell us how it disappeared. Due to such an incident, each of the new objects had to be localized to avoid similar mistakes with the disappearance of new objects. Apparently, the prototype is one of the very first experiments of Playtime Corp. The second time we encounter the prototype, or rather its hand, is when it reaches for a part of the dead body of Mommy Longlegs to take it for its further purposes, which we'll learn about later. After the prototype takes a part of Mommy Longlegs' body, we headed to the next room where we found another gray cassette that also talks about the prototype. This time, we're told about the incredible resourcefulness of this object, who managed to create a laser pointer from makeshift items, namely a digital alarm clock, specifically its batteries and other components. Subject 1006 was able to make a laser pointer to disable the camera. It had 28 whole 3/10 of a second to hide. One member of the scientific staff decided to see what happened. However, the hiding prototype tried to escape through the open door to the employees. But another staff member noticed that the prototype tried to escape and remotely closed the door, leaving the first person with it. After that, an incident occurred, and the staff concluded that it was necessary to restrict the ability of other test subjects to transmit the same level of intellect and propensity for violence as it was with the prototype. Another test subject we were previously familiar with, Huggy Wuggy, Object 1170, is brought up as an example. Unlike other experiments, he is a kind of standard, having sufficient intellect combined with maximum obedience. With the end of the first chapter, people speculated that Object 1006 was Huggy Wuggy, as we knew nothing else about the other objects. But with the release of Chapter 2, we not only received new information through a new cassette, but also saw the prototype itself. I'm telling you all this not just because. You might say, why am I telling you the story from the first and second chapters? But wait, soon we'll move on to the third chapter and figure out, based on the data from the first two chapters, what the fourth chapter will be like. What theories do I have about this character from the Poppy Playtime universe? Its incredible intelligence and immense propensity for violence can make it one of the best antagonists in the entire game, perhaps even the main antagonist. Have you heard that it literally made a whole laser pointer from makeshift means? And do you remember what happened to Mommy Longlegs when it appeared? It took a part of her body. And here's a very interesting point. Mommy Longlegs knew about the presence of the prototype, and by killing her, we made it possible for him to take her limbs because, as I understood it before, he couldn't do that due to possibly insufficient construction. What kind of construction? The construction of his shell. He took a part of Mommy Longlegs to make limbs for himself and other toys that were in the location, namely all the toys we encountered in the second chapter, all those bloody little toys that were in the boxes and encountered us at each of the locations of the second chapter. Mommy Longlegs herself said these words before her death.
What have you done? It'll make me part of him!
She knew that he does similar things with other toys, and previously, he didn't have the opportunity to catch Mommy Longlegs due to her mobility, which she possessed when she was alive. And then I thought, what if Huggy Wuggy was one of those toys that the prototype managed to take behind the scenes? What if he also becomes one of those that eventually become part of his new body? And why didn't he attack the main character? It's all very simple. He still doesn't have enough elements to resist the main character to show his aggression to the fullest. Perhaps he is now just a hand, and he is gathering all the materials to assemble everything and make himself a huge hybrid from all the toys, living and non-living, at the Playtime Corp factory. And you know, it's a very intriguing moment that I want to see in the upcoming chapter if the prototype shows itself after all, and it seems to me that the future antagonist of the 4th chapter will also go into disuse to become a new part of the prototype's body. And I remind you that the next location that will at least appear in the 4th chapter is a new location of a daycare and laboratory. It reminds me of the same security breach where there was a similar location. And by the way, one character from the daycare is already known to us, Daisy, the same flower that we first saw in the trailer for the 2nd chapter. However, instead of her, there was already Bunzo Bunny. However, what I imagine the prototype to be right now is a roboticized hand with a human bone as a joint. There's another very interesting detail associated with the prototype. When Huggy Wuggy or other characters from subsequent chapters kill us, or at least I haven't checked it, I remember that in the 1st chapter, there was a very interesting inscription, or maybe even several, but one I will definitely remember. The prototype will save us. What exactly was meant by this phrase? Possibly some strange thoughts and ideas about saving humanity, which are actually manic or even genocidal intentions, or maybe some underestimated possibilities for saving humanity, which are humane. I don't know what exactly is meant by it. Maybe it's the first option we were told about, that the prototype is a rather aggressive character, an aggressive object who is smart and quite cunning. At one point, I even think that the prototype, or Experiment 1006, is that very Elliot Ludwig, the director of Playtime Corp who died in the 1960s. He was truly a smart man because it was he who created such living toys. And perhaps before his death, he somehow managed to make such machinations with his body, redirecting himself into this roboticized hand. This is possible, and may be the reason for the intelligence of the prototype itself. Or somehow Elliot Ludwig passed on his qualities and knowledge to the prototype because he was one of the first such experiments. There's a lot to think about this because now we've revealed the director himself, who could possibly be a clue or just the lore of Playtime Corp itself to make it clearer to us. Or, as I said earlier, it's really the most direct clue that he plays a role in his own plot, just like other employees who were in those same pipes. By the way, the pipes! Do you remember? At the beginning, when the pub grabs Mommy Longlegs, we fall into that same pipe and end up at the entrance to the game station. Well, that's the same location where the train was, as well as the mini-games we had to play to get the train code. So, the same pipe we descended into was accordingly the pipe of that same Elliot Ludwig. Yes, of course, the concept that they constantly descended into such places to end up in other locations is strange, but maybe such a fantasy. In addition to Elliot Ludwig and other personnel who are partially known to us, there is also another pipe with no name, or rather all the letters were on the ground, meaning we don't know the name of one of the staff members, and maybe he is that very prototype. Why do I even think that some characters are monsters or prototypes? Like we remember, both Huggy Wuggy and Mommy Longlegs, as well as other toys, even though they were small, had blood, a part of the organism, and there are constant rumors that all experiments are former Playtime Corp employees, or some volunteers who decided to become such creatures, most of whom after such metamorphoses became quite insane. I'm talking about the same Huggy Wuggy, Kissy Missy, PJ, Mopsy, and others aggressive characters. So this employee might be one of the candidates for the prototype's shell, although the fact that the unknown character from this pipe might also be another toy, for example, even Poppy, although I'll have a separate video about this little girl.